What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our top 15 overall rankings for the 2022 fantasy football season. These are our top 15 overall players, includes, all the positions, and it will be on a PPR basis. So just keep that in mind. And basically, we're going to share this list with you, break it down, why each player sits at the position they do, any concerns we might have, etc., etc. So it should be a very interesting episode. And if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? What order would you have some of these players in? Is there anybody that should have 1000% been in the top 15 that wasn't? Along with any other questions you guys might have, we will do our best to answer them all. And lastly, make sure to check out the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Has rankings like these and more, general fantasy advice as well. All the details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And as you can see, we have got our rankings, our cheat sheet here pulled up, our overall player rankings. And we're going to start at the number one spot, as you would expect. Again, this is PPR based, so I want to preface it with that. Christian McCaffrey, due to that reason, comes in at the number one spot. Now, again, with these rankings, with these projections, you assume a full season being played. Now, yes, some players have dealt with injuries, which makes them riskier. So when you draft, you're going to back them up with, other pieces. But when you're talking about pure projections based off of, a fully healthy season, I continue to contend, especially in full PPR scoring, Christian McCaffrey deserves the number one spot. Yes, he is riskier than some other names, but when he is healthy, he has proven year after year, regardless of the quarterback, whether it's a rush-heavy quarterback like Cam Newton, whether it's an incapable quarterback like a Sam Darnold, Christian McCaffrey is still what makes this offense go. Yes, there were some pieces like a Donta Foreman added in the offseason. Doesn't worry me all that much. The value for McCaffrey comes from what he can do as a pass catcher, and he's going to continue to be used that way. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's second on the team in terms of receptions, something like that. Last time we saw him play a full season, he had a 1,000 type of year. Now, I think those years are probably behind him. But in my opinion, I mean, he's shown it every single season, despite these last 2 years missing the majority, of that 17-week season, that when he is available, he is the guy. Like, he is putting up top 5 numbers. And that's another huge reason why, despite missing the majority of these last 2 years, he is still in contention for being the number one pick overall. And that's how impressive that is. So due to that, due to the fact that he is the integral part of this offense, he's still going to get his carries. I imagine he'll still get 15 plus carries a game. He'll probably get those between 7 to 8, 9 targets a game, something like that. I've got Christian McCaffrey as my number one guy. Moving on, we have got Jonathan Taylor. I'd say probably the typical 101 pick. I can't hate on Jonathan Taylor. I think everything that we saw last season is a sign for things to come. Very high rushing upside, very high touchdown upside, has a very good offensive line, has an upgrade at the quarterback position, which should improve the offense and the scoring output of that offense with Matt Ryan versus Carson Wentz last year. So I really like Jonathan Taylor. The other guys on this offense don't really scare me all that much. I mean, if they didn't scare you last year when he finished as the 101, they shouldn't scare you this season either. Jonathan Taylor, a little bit safer than Christian McCaffrey, obviously has less tread on his tires. He's younger, so I understand why people can have him higher. It's tough to argue it, but for me personally, he is the number 2 guy on this list for me. Then afterwards, we get to Austin Ekeler. There was no bigger advocate, I am sure of that, last season than myself for Austin Ekeler. I got crushed for selecting Austin Ekeler as a top 3 guy consistently, but wouldn't you know it, he finishes as the second overall running back across all formats last season. Is another finish like that possible? Yes, it definitely is. The problem, it's going to cost you this year. We're very good at identifying players a year before they break out and, kind of highlighting them and trying to convince you guys to take a chance on them before the price tag goes up. That's what we did with Austin Ekeler last year. It's what we're going to do with other players at the running back position, other positions as well. But now the cat's out of the bag with Austin Ekeler, folks. He's a mini Christian McCaffrey on one of the best offenses in the NFL with one of the brightest stars at the quarterback position in Justin Herbert, with one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. He's a top pass catcher. Sure, he won't get as high volume as a McCaffrey or a Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, but he more than makes up for it with what he can do as a pass catcher. That's why I absolutely love him in PPR formats. He is my number 3 guy. Next up, we get to Derrick Henry. And here, this is very close with the name underneath him. Spoiler, it's Cooper Kupp. But Derrick Henry here comes in at this spot because, obviously, of his immense rushing upside. I mean, the guy last season, even though he missed the majority of the year, still almost had 1,000 yards. And I think, this offense for the Titans is going to continue to go through Derrick Henry. Now, a lot of people are worried. He's getting up there in age, the tread, injuries, stuff like that. So I wouldn't be shocked if, this is one of the final years where Derrick Henry is ranked this high. I do think he is a little bit riskier, kind of in that Christian McCaffrey category. But if you predict a full season, then I don't know how you can't have Derrick Henry as one of the favorites for leading the league in rushing yards and potentially rushing touchdowns like Jonathan Taylor. His pass catching upside, that's the issue. It's pretty much non-existent. Definitely higher in standard formats. He's my number 2 running back there behind Jonathan Taylor. Here, I do have him as a top 5 guy. But if you want to make the argument again that you'd rather have here some of those pass catchers like a Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson, I completely get it. I personally prioritize the running back position, so that's why Derrick Henry is at the number 4 spot. Then moving on to number 5, I mentioned it before, we've got Cooper Kupp. He won the Triple Crown last year: receptions, touchdowns, yards, absolutely amazing. So what happens when you have a legitimate quarterback? Now, I'm not going to say that it's going to happen again with Cooper Kupp. In fact, I expect very serious regression. But the thing is, even if there is serious regression and he does 80% of what he did last year, that's still going to translate to a top 5 wide receiver. It's just very hard to duplicate back-to-back wide receiver 1 seasons. And for that reason, I would warn people that, don't be shocked if Cooper Kupp, even though you draft him as a top 5 guy, a top 6 guy, wherever you draft him, usually somewhere in the first round, that he doesn't finish as the number 1 overall wide receiver. Now, even despite that, I still think he's going to be a top 5 guy. I do really like the addition of Allen Robinson for the Rams. So, I think that's a lot of, potentially targets are going to go Robinson's way. But considering the type of season he's coming off of, you have to rank Cooper Kupp at the number 1 spot. More so, you just have to realize at the same time, it's very hard to duplicate that. So if you want to have Justin Jefferson, who I just have a couple spots lower, ahead of Cooper Kupp, no issues with that. I just love the offense for the Rams. I love Matthew Stafford, the connection he has with Cooper Kupp. Pretty much as safe as you can get. So Cooper Kupp does come in at the number 5 spot for me. Next up, we've got Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. Look, I think Dalvin Cook is still actually right now an underrated running back per the mocks that we've done. You can regularly get him outside of the top 5. I've even seen him go with the 8th, 9th, 10th overall pick. I still think when healthy, he's one of the best dual threat running backs. He's a hard-nosed runner. He's a talented pass catcher. The offense, even though obviously Justin Jefferson is more and more involved every single season, the idea is not to make Kirk Cousins, this elite quarterback. They want to have him be a capable game manager, and then Dalvin Cook do the majority of his damage. I still believe that that's the case. And honestly, I think Cook is one of the most well-rounded running backs in the NFL. He can catch the football. He can rush it very well. If he plays a full season, I think you're going to get great return on investment with Dalvin Cook. Some people, I think, are a little bit sleeping on him for some of the pass catchers, for a guy like Najee Harris, for example, but I'm still very much so in on Dalvin Cook. Then we get to the number 7 spot here. I've got Aaron Jones. Shouldn't be a surprise to people that have been keeping up with my mocks, with my, kind of fantasy advice breakdowns. I am all in on Aaron Jones this year, and it has everything to do with the departure of one Davante Adams. We've seen it before. When Davante Adams is unavailable for the Packers, Aaron Jones becomes the primary pass catcher, which means that is a gold mine for PPR formats. Again, that's what we're talking about here. I'd have him much lower in standard scoring leagues, but I think there's a very real chance that he leads the Packers in receptions, hell, maybe even yards, as crazy as that sounds. People worried about A.J. Dillon. I still think this backfield belongs to Aaron Jones, even if it might be like a 55-45 split, even though I think it might be closer to 60-40, just because, I think it's as simple as I think Aaron Rodgers trusts Aaron Jones more than some of the other weapons that he has offensively. I think the upside for Aaron Jones is insane. Like if there's a running back I'm hanging my hat on this year, similar to Austin Ekeler last year, Aaron Jones is one of those guys. I think that, right now you can get tremendous value on him. He's regularly going in the second round. I, as you can see, would have him as a first rounder. No doubt. I think he is a top 5 running back type of talent this year. Next up, we go to Justin Jefferson, and a lot of the things that we said about Cooper Kupp, you can just copy and paste here with Jefferson. A lot of people even have Jefferson ahead of Cooper Kupp, barely. But I think either way, it's splitting hairs, whether you're team Kupp, whether you're team Jefferson. Jefferson's probably, the future. He's younger than Cooper Kupp, and, probably, he has less competition offensively than Kupp, who's got Van Jefferson. He's got Allen Robinson. So Jefferson is going to get probably more volume, things like that. But he does have the lesser quarterback in Kirk Cousins. Nonetheless, he's still good enough to get Justin Jefferson the football. And that translates to, in my opinion, him being worthy of a first-round selection. To me, there's only 2 wide receivers pretty much that are worthy of a first-round pick. That is Cooper Kupp. That is Justin Jefferson. And for that reason, again, Jefferson comes in at this number 8 spot for me. I think similar to Cooper Kupp here, you can project between a 1,500 to like 1,700 type of season as long as he plays the full year, no injuries. And then the touchdowns, the receptions are going to be the X factors here in terms of how high these top wide receivers finish. Then we've got Najee Harris at the number 9 spot. He's a guy, honestly, that I keep going back and forth on. I do think compared to last year, there will be regression. I don't think we're going to see a top 5 season from him because mainly I think the reception count is going to drop off significantly. You've got a quarterback, and whether it's Trubisky or Pickett, that they're not as limited as Big Ben was last year throwing the football, which resulted in a lot of dinks and dumps, short passes. So Najee Harris probably won't clean up as much as he did in that category. But it's hard to ignore what he did on the ground with an awful offensive line. So I think that, the rushing upside is still there. He'll probably finish with around, if I had to guess, between 40 to 50 receptions, something like that. I just think there's a little bit of uncertainty right now on this Pittsburgh offense with the quarterback situation, just unresolved. Is it going to be Trubisky? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett for the entirety of the year? I like the upside for Harris, but he's another guy that I think does have a risk factor. So if you want to go safer, if you want to go somebody like a Swift or a Barkley, who you see are the next 2 names on our list, then I totally get it. Afterwards, coming in at the number 10 spot, rounding out our top 10, we've got DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. To me, he's a guy similar to, I guess, like an Austin Ekeler light type of situation. I love what he was doing last season. Prior to his injury, the Detroit Lions were feeding DeAndre Swift the ball, not only as a rusher, but as a pass catcher, which is what made him so valuable in PPR formats. The thing that has me worried, however, with Swift, and why I've kind of cooled on him a little bit, I mean, I'm still very high on him. Obviously, I have him as a top 10 player, is that there's just so many targets now that could potentially go elsewhere. You've still got Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've still got TJ Hawkinson. You've got the newly added Jameson Williams. And you've got Jared Goff, who isn't going to throw for 5,000 plus yards. So, the receiving yardage is limited. And if that happens, and if Swift isn't near the top of the pecking order, then he's going to take a hit in PPR formats. So due to that, I realize that in some regards, he can be a risky aspect. In standard formats, I do have him lower, but I just love these pass-catching running backs. That's why you see guys like Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Austin Ekeler last year ranked higher on our boards. And I think the way it should be when it comes to PPR formats, in fantasy football, a dual threat running back is king, and DeAndre Swift definitely fits that category. Next up, we've got Saquon Barkley here of the New York Giants. And, I think now pretty much he's had 2 seasons to come back from the ACL. Last year wasn't at 100%. And now the Giants have improved their offensive line. I think he's still going to be the engine that makes this offense work, regardless of whether Daniel Jones proves that he can be the guy or not. To me, with Barkley, the things you have to be excited about, again, he's had more time to get back, hopefully, closer to 100%. And then the offensive line improvements. That's really all you can ask for. He's, a very talented dual threat running back, similar to a Dalvin Cook. Like at 100%, we saw what he did in his rookie season. Afterwards, it was issues of health. It was issues of a bad team, things like that. I think both those issues have been improved on. And we can see something similar to Saquon Barkley of his rookie season. Really reminds me of like a Todd Gurley situation after his rookie season where he balled out, then he had a flat kind of sophomore year, and then huge discount on him. He goes like in the 3rd round, which is where Saquon Barkley was going. Now his ADP is rising towards the 2nd round. I think that's naturally going to happen because of the name recognition. But if you can get him in the 3rd round, that's absolutely awesome. I'd be smashing the draft button on that all day long. But as you can see per these rankings here, I'd be okay taking him in the early 2nd round. Next up, we have got Joe Mixon, a guy that kind of finally lived up to the potential of what he could be last year. The Cincinnati Bengals obviously got it going, made that Super Bowl run, even though they came up short. But Mixon was heavily involved. He broke out in the rushing department. Now, the pass catching is where still a lot left to be desired. If that is unlocked and he can go for like 50-plus catches, that's what could make Joe Mixon a perennial top 5 running back. But I don't see that happening. That's just not a specialty. There's other guys, all pretty much the wide receivers are ahead of the pecking order on him when it comes to that. I think he's more of a standard suited running back. Yes, he'll give you probably between 30 to 45 catches on the year. But there could be more to it. The offensive line is improved, which I do like, but I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if there's a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover here. Massive expectations for the Cincinnati Bengals to repeat again. It's tough to do. So I do want to mention that. But otherwise, on paper, the situation is a better one for Joe Mixon. However, I do think it could be a little bit tough to repeat. I think a lot of the running backs that had big years last year, it's because, other guys were injured. So naturally, they might have just, been lower on the rankings. If, let's say, it's Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, a Christian McCaffrey was healthy for the entirety of the year, if that makes sense. But let's get to our number 13 spot here. We're going to show some love to the pass catchers. Next up at 13, we have got Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's used to being a top 3 guy at the wide receiver position, probably higher when he had Aaron Rodgers. Now he's going to Derek Carr. But I'm a Derek Carr big-time fan. Honestly, this year I think he can do some great things. He's one of my top quarterback sleepers for the season. And I think that he could challenge for the league lead in passing yards, which is only going to help all of the pass catchers on this offense. Obviously, Davante Adams being at the head of the table. There's a reason why they traded so much to get Davante Adams. And there's a connection between him and Carr. Now, yes, I don't think the upside will be as huge as when it was Adams with the Packers and Rodgers, but not necessarily because of the decline at the quarterback position. It's because there's more valid options. Like the Raiders still have a Hunter Renfrow. They still got a Darren Waller. The Packers, they never had that depth. Like it was Alan Lazard, it was MVS. So Rodgers had to go to Davante Adams. Carr will have some other options. So for that reason, I think that Adams is outside of the tier 1 group of wide receivers with Kupp and Jefferson. But in terms of PPR, I think he's still going to get massive volume, which I have him for that reason right there neck and neck with Stephon Diggs, who comes in at the number 14 spot. If you want to have him one spot ahead of Adams, them two flip-flopped, I totally get it. I just think Adams is going to see a little bit more volume. With Diggs, though, He's, again, on a great offense with one of the best young quarterbacks in Josh Allen. Curious to see how guys like Gabe Davis will improve the involvement of a Jamison Crowder as well. But either way, I think Diggs is going to see his fair share of volume. Now, yes, last year compared to his 2020 season, he was a disappointment. In reality, what we can expect this year, I think, is something in between. And for that reason, I have him a little bit lower than Devontae Adams. But again, I think realistically in that tier 2 category of like Adams, Diggs, Jamar Chase, you can really order Diggs and Adams any which way you want. And I think the majority of analysts would have zero issue with it. He's still the number 1 wide receiver on a very heavy offense and a very high scoring offense. So Diggs still belongs to be in that top 5 conversation for wide receivers, top 4 even, if you will. And if you can get him later in the second round, I would be doing that all day long. And then finally, let's give some love to Travis Kelce here. Now, again, these rankings are based on my projections. And Kelce, without Tyreek Hill, big expectations, big opportunity in terms of receptions, in terms of receiving yards, in terms of touchdowns. He's by far the number 1 weapon for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, in some people's eyes. Now, yes, they added Juju Smith-Schuster, but Smith-Schuster isn't going to be a direct replacement for Tyreek Hill. Neither are the rookies that they have. I don't expect Mecole Hardman to magically break out this season, something like that to happen. Kelce is still the number 1 guy. I think he's the number 1 tight end in fantasy football, even if Mark Andrews had that title last season. Give me the tight end with Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football, and now without Tyreek Hill for competition. There's still guys that can, be dangerous there, but I think Kelce will get his. He is a matchup nightmare. I really like him this season. Again, due to his age, probably his time this highly on these type of lists is going to be short-lived. But for now, for 2022, I really like the upside. He's typically going at the sometimes start of the second round, I would say. Now, typically, again, I like to wait for my tight ends to get them a little bit later just because I know I would rather load up on running backs, on wide receivers first. But in terms of pure projections, in terms of how the numbers stack up, when you do the math in fantasy points, Travis Kelce, I think, has a, kind of reason to be this high along these other pass catchers. He's basically a wide receiver 1 at the tight end position, which is very valuable. But with that, we wrap up this top 15 breakdown. And again, it's still, I would say, relatively early. We're going to do another one of these updated breakdowns, again, whether it's top 15, top 20, when we get closer to September, because this list is undoubtedly going to change with news coming out, with training camp, things like that, preseason. So keep an eye out for that. If you guys enjoyed, though, hit that like button, subscribe. Definitely let me hear it in the comment section, whether you agreed or not, along with any other questions you guys might have. I'll do my best to answer them all. And lastly, again, check out the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Everything you want at a great value. Details in the description. In the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.